The air in the world that morning was no different than it had been for centuries. In cities across the globe, the familiar rhythms of life held sway. The slow creep of rush hour traffic, the hurried footsteps of commuters, the gentle hum of morning news programs playing on screens in quiet kitchens. Yet, beneath the surface of this ordinary day, a tremor was building, a seismic shift in the very bedrock of human history, emanating from the smallest independent state on earth. In the heart of Rome, within the ancient walls of the Vatican, an announcement was being prepared that would silence the noise of the modern world and turn every eye toward a mystery buried in stone and shadow for 5 millennia. The news did not break with a thunderclap, but with the measured, solemn tone befitting an institution that measures its age in millennia. It was a press release, crisp and formal, distributed simultaneously to every major news agency, religious outlet, and archaeological foundation. Its language was precise, almost sterile, but the words themselves were explosive. They spoke of a conclave of historians, archivists, and engineers, working under the utmost secrecy for a decade. They mentioned a series of forgotten scrolls discovered behind a false wall in the Vatican Library's deepest manuscript repository, which contained not theological treatises but intricate architectural schematics and a cryptic diary of sorts written in a dialect of Aramaic. So ancient it took years to decipher fully. The schematics revealed the existence of a substructure, a vault, far older than the foundations of St. Peter's Basilica itself. It was not a burial chamber, not a catacomb, not a storage room for early Christian relics. According to the coordinates and descriptions painstakingly translated, this was a construction of breathtaking complexity and immense age, sealed shut by a mechanism of immense stone and unknown engineering over 5,000 years ago. The diary, attributed to a long-dead guardian of the secret, simply referred to it as the Custodia Veritatis, the guardian of truth. It spoke of a time before pharaohs, before the great empires of Mesopotamia had fully risen, a time when humanity's memory was young. The last entry, dated by scholars to roughly 3000 BCE, stated the vault was sealed until the world is ready to receive its silence. For the Vatican, the discovery presented an unprecedented theological and historical quandary. This was a secret buried deep beneath the center of the Christian world, yet from a time long before Abraham, before Moses, before the concept of a single God had taken root in the human consciousness. What truth could it guard? What artifacts could lie within that were so potent they required 5,000 years of isolation? After years of intense, private deliberation, prayer, and scientific consultation, a momentous decision was reached. The vault would not be left in darkness. With a mix of trepidation and a profound sense of duty to human knowledge, a multidisciplinary team of the world's foremost experts was assembled in secret. They would attempt the unthinkable, to open the Custodia Veritatis. And so, on this seemingly ordinary morning, the world learned that the unopened door was finally to be breached. The announcement sent a shockwave that was both instantaneous and universal. Social media, that great pulse of the modern era, exploded into a frenzy of speculation, conspiracy theories, and awe. News channels interrupted their regular programming, their graphics adorned with dramatic images of the Vatican and cryptic, digitally rendered vault doors. Scholars of history, archaeology, theology, and even theoretical physics found themselves suddenly, utterly, consumed by a single question: what lies beneath? The air itself in St. Peter's Square seemed to crackle with a new kind of energy. The usual crowd of pilgrims and tourists, there to witness the ancient grandeur of the church, now looked upon the cobblestones with a new understanding. Beneath their feet, not in the crypts of the popes, but deeper, in the primordial earth, a chamber was waiting. Its silence, maintained across an expanse of time so vast it defied comprehension, was about to be broken. The world held its breath, waiting for the first live broadcast, waiting for the first glimpse into an age lost to myth and memory. The guardian of truth was about to speak. The selection process was, by necessity, one of the most clandestine and rigorous ever undertaken. It was not merely a matter of finding the best experts in their respective fields. It was about finding individuals who possessed a unique synthesis of brilliance, discretion, and a temperament suited for the unimaginable. The Vatican, in collaboration with a handful of trusted international bodies, did not publicly announce the team's formation. Instead, invitations were extended in person, in quiet rooms, under vows of absolute secrecy that preceded any explanation of the project. The team that gradually coalesced in the secure, specially constructed briefing facility beneath the Vatican museums was a constellation of human intellect, a gathering of minds the likes of which had never been assembled for a single purpose. They were known to each other mostly by reputation, their names appearing in the footnotes of groundbreaking academic papers or on the spines of definitive texts. Now, they were colleagues, bound together by a secret that would redefine their lives and potentially all of human history. Leading the historical and linguistic effort was Dr. Eris Thorne, a professor of ancient semiotic languages from the University of Cambridge, a man in his late 60s with a perpetually furrowed brow and eyes that seemed to look through you into a distant past. Thorne was the one who had finally cracked the Aramaic code of the Guardian's diary. He understood the weight of every word, the cultural context of every phrase. His opposite number in the field of archaeology was Dr. Elena Petrova, a Russian-Italian specialist in pre-classical subterranean structures. In her early 50s, with the sturdy build of someone who had spent a lifetime on digs, Petrova was a pragmatist, her mind focused on stone, mortar, and spatial reasoning, the physical truth of the vault itself. The engineering challenges were monumental. The schematics suggested a door that was not merely locked, but intrinsically sealed, possibly through a mechanism that used the very pressure of the earth around it. For this, they had enlisted Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a Japanese geological engineer whose work on stabilizing ancient monuments against earthquakes was legendary. Quiet and methodical, Tanaka spoke rarely, but when he did, the entire room fell silent. Alongside him was Dr. Isabelle Moreau, a French materials scientist from CERN, whose expertise lay in analyzing unknown alloys and composite structures at a molecular level. Her tools were not shovels and brushes, but electron microscopes and spectral analyzers. Completing the core team were two unconventional choices. The first was Father Michael O'Flaherty, a Jesuit priest and a respected historian of pre-Abrahamic religions. The Vatican's official representative, he was not there as a theologian to defend doctrine, but as a scholar to seek understanding, a bridge between the potentially earth-shattering contents of the vault and the faith of billions. The final member was the youngest, Dr. Lena Cruz, a renowned data archaeologist and pattern recognition expert from MIT. Her role was to manage the terabytes of data the team would generate, to look for connections and correlations invisible to the human eye, to treat the entire vault as a complex dataset to be decrypted. Their first briefing was held in a sterile, windowless chamber known as the Sala del Silencio, the Room of Silence. A large holographic table displayed a rotating three-dimensional rendering of the vault's schematics, a beautiful and terrifying labyrinth of passages, chambers, and the infamous central door of vast, circular stone etched with symbols none of them could yet decipher. Dr. Petrova was the first to speak after the initial presentation. "The structural integrity is alarming," she said, her finger tracing a narrow, descending passage on the hologram. "The schematics show it was built within a natural granite shelf, which is why it has survived. But our activity, our equipment, even our breath, will change the microclimate within. Our first and greatest task is not to open it, but to reach it without causing a collapse." Dr. Tanaka nodded slowly, zooming in on the door mechanism. "The diary says it was sealed shut. It does not say it was designed to be reopened. This is not a lock, it is a permanent closure. We are not locksmiths. We are surgeons performing an operation on a patient who has been in a coma for 5,000 years. Dr. Thorne adjusted his glasses, peering at the symbols around the door's circumference. "The language here is proto-symbolic. It predates the Aramaic of the diary by centuries, perhaps a millennium or more. It is not a language of instruction, but of warning, or perhaps a test." Father O'Flaherty listened, his hands steepled under his chin. "A test of what?" "Doctor, of worthiness," Thorne replied quietly. "The diary suggests the seal is not just physical. There is an intellectual component, a puzzle. To open it by force would be to violate its purpose, to prove ourselves unworthy of whatever truth it guards." It was then that Dr. Cruz leaned forward, her fingers flying across her datapad. "I've been cross-referencing the geometric patterns around the door with every known database of ancient symbology. There's a 78% correlation with patterns found in megalithic sites in Anatolia and Orkney, sites also dating back to the 4th millennium BCE. This wasn't built in isolation. The knowledge, or the builders, were part of a widespread, sophisticated network." The room fell silent. The implication was staggering. The vault was not an anomaly. It was a piece of a puzzle, a single node in a lost global network of knowledge from a time history had forgotten. The plan was formed with painstaking care. They would not dig from above. The schematics revealed a forgotten access tunnel, itself over 2,000 years old, leading from the Scavi, the excavated necropolis beneath St. Peter's, towards the older structure. This tunnel would be their artery. Their first physical step would be to navigate this ancient Roman passage, reinforce it where necessary, and reach the outer wall of the Custodia. There, they would establish a base of operations, a clean room, a laboratory, a command center from which the final approach would be launched. Weeks of preparation followed. The world outside continued to buzz with anticipation, unaware that the team had already begun its descent. Specialized equipment was quietly brought in: ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors, atmospheric monitors, and laser scanning systems of incredible precision. The Vatican gardens, usually a place of peace, saw the discreet installation of ventilation systems that would pump filtered air deep underground and a power grid that would sustain their work for months. Finally, the day arrived. Dressed in non-conductive environmental suits, the team stood at the mouth of the forgotten tunnel. A dark, low opening cordoned off deep within the restricted areas of the Scavi. The air was cool and carried the faint, dusty smell of centuries. Dr. Petrova took the first step, her helmet light piercing the darkness. "All right," she said, her voice calm but carrying a weight of history. "Let's go meet our past." One by one, they disappeared into the earth, leaving the modern world behind, walking into a darkness that had waited for them since the dawn of civilization. The tunnel was not a constructed corridor in the modern sense, but a narrow, uneven passage hewn directly from the living rock. The air, once stirred by their entry, carried the scent of deep time, a complex aroma of damp clay, minerals leached from stone over millennia, and the faint, metallic temps of ancient, oxidized iron. Their helmet lights did not so much illuminate the space as carved fragile, swaying islands of visibility out of an oppressive, absolute black. The silence was a physical presence, broken only by the hum of their suit fans, the scuff of their boots on the worn stone floor, and the rhythmic, amplified sound of their own breathing. Dr. Tanaka led the way, his eyes glued to a handheld seismic reader, its screen a swirl of green and yellow data. "The integrity is stable," he murmured, his voice a soft crackle in the other's earpieces. "But the rock is old. It whispers. We must listen." Behind him, Dr. Petrova ran a gloved hand along the wall, her touch surprisingly gentle. "This isn't Roman work," she commented, her professional curiosity cutting through the tension. "The tool marks. See the angle of the chisel strikes. It's rougher, more direct. The Romans were surgeons with stone. Whoever carved this was using stronger, cruder tools. This is older, much older." Dr. Thorne, following closely, adjusted the camera mounted on his shoulder, its lens capturing every detail for the archives. "A service tunnel," he theorized, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. The diary mentioned the path of the keepers. This must be it, not for the public, not for ceremony. A functional route for those who knew the secret. The descent was gradual but relentless. The temperature dropped steadily, a chill that seeped through the environmental controls of their suits. Condensation beaded on the cold rock faces, glittering in their lights like a field of tiny stars. After nearly an hour of careful progress, the tunnel began to change. The rough-hewn walls gave way to smoother, dressed stone blocks of a distinct, massive character. "Stop," Petrova said, her hand held up. She moved her light over the new masonry. "We've transitioned. This is the outer shell, the first layer of the vault's construction." The blocks were enormous, fitted together without mortar. The joins were so tight that not even a razor blade could have been inserted between them. The engineering was flawless, a testament to a skill that should not have existed in such a remote age. Dr. Moreau, the materials scientist, unholstered a handheld spectrometer and pressed it against the stone. The device whirred softly. "Granite," she reported, "but with a crystalline structure I've never seen. The pressure and heat used to form these blocks, ... It's not natural. It's as if they were forged, not quarried." The revelation hung in the air. Forged stone. The concept was absurd to modern geology, yet the data on her screen was unequivocal. They pressed on, the tunnel now running straight and true, a stark contrast to the meandering natural fissure they had just left. The air grew stiller, drier. It was no longer the air of a damp underground passage, but the air of a sealed tomb, untouched by external winds for epochs. Another 30 minutes of walking brought them to their first major obstacle, a dead end. The tunnel terminated in a solid wall of the same mysterious, forged granite. There was no visible door, no handle, no keyhole. It was a seamless barrier. A wave of quiet despair threatened to wash over the group. Had they come all this way only to be stopped by a blank wall? It was Dr. Cruz, the data archaeologist, who broke the silence. "Scan it," she said, her voice eager. "Full spectrum, LiDAR, thermal, ultrasonic, everything. If it's a door, it's hiding its secrets." Well, the team went to work with a quiet efficiency, setting up tripods with various scanning devices. The scanners whirred and clicked, painting the wall with invisible light and sound, sending the data back to Cruz's main terminal. "Nothing," Tanaka said after a moment, studying his own seismic device. "It reads as solid, 20 meters thick, at least. It's not a door, it's a plug." But Cruz was shaking her head, her eyes darting across her screens. "Wait, look at this." She zoomed in on a LiDAR reflectance map. The surface isn't uniform. There's a pattern, an incredibly faint depression, a circular groove about 2 meters in diameter, and within it, ... symbols. They're not carved into the surface. The surface was built up around them. They are the original layer. Thorne rushed to her side, peering at the screen. The symbols were indeed there, visible only to the most sensitive instruments. A ring of 7 intricate, non-repeating icons surrounding a central, empty circle. "Protocuneiform," Thorne whispered, his voice filled with awe, but not quite. "It's a precursor, a language of concepts, not words." He traced the symbols on the screen. This one, it could mean water, or flow, or time. This one, Earth's stability, foundation. They are elemental concepts. "So it is a test," Father O'Flaherty said, joining them. "A lock of understanding." "But how does it open?" Petrova asked, practical as ever. "Do we press them? In what sequence?" Thorne studied the symbols, his mind racing across 5,000 years of linguistic evolution. The diary, it spoke of the harmony of the 7 pillars. It wasn't being metaphorical. It was an instruction. The sequence must reflect a logical, harmonious order of these elements, a primary philosophy. For hours, they debated, theorized, and tested. They tried sequences based on ancient creation myths, on the order of planetary bodies known to ancient astronomers, on the hierarchy of natural elements. Each time, nothing happened. The wall remained implacably solid. The biohazard symbol glinted in their lights, a stark, anachronistic splash of modern dread in the heart of a prehistoric sanctum. A silence heavier than the surrounding rock descended upon the team. The exhilaration of solving the musical lock and illuminating the antechamber vanished, replaced by a cold, primal caution. Dr. Moreau was the first to move, her scientific instincts overriding her fear. She unshouldered her pack and began assembling a sophisticated environmental sensor array on a tripod. "Everyone, back up. Now," she ordered, her voice tight. "Full seal, check on your suits. I need atmospheric analysis before we even think about taking another step." The team retreated a few meters from the yawning black doorway, their lights still fixed on the ominous symbol. The cheerful hum of their equipment now felt like a violation in the solemn silence. "Readings," Moreau said, her eyes glued to the screens on her console. "Atmosphere beyond the door is inert," she reported, her brow furrowed. "Nitrogen, argon, trace noble gases, no oxygen, no carbon dioxide, no organic compounds whatsoever. It's not just sterile, it's void, it's been scrubbed clean." "What about pathogens, biological agents?" Petrova asked, her hand resting on the emergency sealant kit attached to her belt. "Nothing my sensors can detect. No airborne particulates larger than a picometer. It's cleaner than an ISO Class 1 cleanroom." Moreau looked up, her expression perplexed. "The biohazard symbol doesn't make sense. There's nothing biological in there to be a hazard, unless the hazard isn't airborne," Tanaka said quietly. He pointed a light at the mosaic floor just beyond the threshold. The silver and gold tiles seemed to swirl, their pattern refusing to resolve into a fixed image. "The warning may be for what is contained within, not the environment itself." Father O'Flaherty stared at the glowing text beneath the symbol. "It is a fire. Fire purifies. It also consumes. This is a spiritual warning as much as a physical one." While the scientists debated, Dr. Cruz was busy. She had launched a small, spider-like robotic probe from her kit. The multi-legged device skittered to the threshold. Its multiple sensors worry. "I'm getting unusual energy readings from beyond the doorway. Not radiation. Something else. A very low-level, coherent field. It's single quotes as ... structured like a containment field." Thorne asked. "Unknown. The probe isn't detecting any physical barriers." Cruz guided the probe forward. It stepped onto the mosaic tiles. The moment its metal legs made contact, the entire mosaic lit up. A network of faint blue lines glowed to life between the tiles, forming a complex circuit board that covered the entire visible floor. The biohazard symbol pulsed with a soft, crimson light. The probe took another step. A beam of pure white light lanced down from the unseen ceiling above, striking the probe with pinpoint accuracy. There was no sound, no explosion. The probe simply vanished. Not melted, not disintegrated, was erased. One moment it was there. The next, the space it occupied was empty. The beam winked out. The mosaic's glow faded. The chamber was silent once more. The team stood frozen, a collective chill seizing them. Tanaka's seismic sensor, which had been monitoring for vibrations, screeched an alarm. The energy discharge, it registered as a microscopic, localized space-time distortion. That wasn't a laser. It was something ... topological. It didn't destroy the probe. It unmade it. The reality of their situation crashed down upon them. This was no simple tomb. It was a fortress guarded by technology that defied physics. The biohazard symbol wasn't a warning of disease. It was a warning of existential erasure. "We cannot cross that," Petrova stated flatly. "It's a kill zone. A perfect defense system that's still active after 5,000 years. But there must be a way," Thorne insisted, his eyes burning with a scholar's desperation. The keepers entered. They sealed it from the inside. "There is a path." "The probe triggered it," Cruz said, her voice shaking slightly as she reviewed the data. "It detected an unauthorized presence, an intrusion." She looked up at the others. "What if it's not detecting life? What if it's detecting ... intention, or a lack of the right frequency?" "The melody," Thorne said suddenly, "in the antechamber. The walls responded to a harmonic key. What if this defense system requires the same?" "It's a theory," Moreau conceded. "But we can't just sing a song and walk across. That beam has a 0% margin for error." Tanaka was studying the mosaic again, zooming in with a high-resolution camera. "The pattern. It is not random. It is a fractal representation of the harmonic sequence we used outside. The same 7 notes, expressed visually. He began mapping the pattern, his fingers flying across a tablet. The safe path is not a physical path. It is a chronological one. You must step on the tiles in the correct sequence, in time with the correct resonant frequency. It is a dance of light and sound. The absurdity of it was overwhelming. To cross an unimaginably advanced defense system, they would have to perform a carefully choreographed routine based on a 5,000-year-old melody. We have the sequence, Thorne said. The creation harmony: earth, water, fire, air, life, thought, spirit. We have the notes from the symbols outside, Cruz added, pulling up the audio file. But we have to step on it, Petrova asked, incredulous. In environmental suits, with perfect timing. One misstep, and we are ... deleted. It is the only theory that fits the evidence, Tanaka said calmly. The builders valued harmony, order, and knowledge. Brute force is met with annihilation. Understanding is rewarded with passage. The weight of the decision settled on them. They had to choose, turn back now, forever wondering what lay in the heart of the vault, or attempt a crossing with their lives literally hanging on every step. Father O'Flaherty looked from the terrifying blackness to the determined faces of his colleagues. We did not come this far to turn back at the final threshold. We have been given the key. We must have the courage to use it. One by one, they nodded. There was no other choice. Cruz synced the harmonic sequence to a metronome that would pulse in their earpieces. Tanaka calculated the exact positions on the mosaic that corresponded to the visual pattern of each note. They would have to take 7 steps, each one landing precisely on the beat, each step onto a specific, shifting tile. Petrova, as the team leader, would go first. She stood at the threshold, her heart hammering against her ribs. The blackness ahead was absolute. The memory of the probe's annihilation was vivid. She took a deep breath, the sound loud in her own helmet. The beat is set, Cruz's voice said in her ear, calm and professional. On my mark. Remember, the step itself must be firm. It needs to generate the acoustic vibration through your boot. Ready, Petrova whispered. Mark. A soft pulse sounded in her ear. Boom. She stepped forward, her heavy boot landing squarely on a tile that swirled with silver. The tile glowed softly under her foot. Nothing happened. Boom. Second step. A gold tile. Another soft glow. Boom. Third step. The tile for fire. She held her breath. The chamber remained silent. Boom. Fourth step. Boom. Fifth. With the 6th step, forethought, the entire mosaic began to glow, the blue lines brightening. Not in warning, but in acceptance. The path ahead was illuminated, a narrow, winding route of specific tiles leading into the darkness. Boom. The 7th and final step. Spirit. As her foot landed, the light from the mosaic flashed once, brightly, and then faded to a soft, permanent glow, outlining the safe path forward. The defense system was standing down. A collective exhale of relief echoed over the comms. One by one, the rest of the team made the crossing, following the illuminated path with painstaking care. Thorne, then Moreau, then Tanaka, Cruz, and finally Father O'Flaherty. Each successful step reinforced the glow of the path. They regrouped on the other side of the threshold, their lights now piercing the darkness ahead. They were in a long, narrow corridor, its walls made of the same light-swallowing material as the door. The mosaic path continued forward, their only guide. They had passed the second test. They had walked through fire and been spared. But as they proceeded down the featureless corridor, the darkness around them felt more profound than ever. They had proven themselves worthy of passage. Now, they were about to learn what that passage led to. The truth, whatever it was, lay just ahead, and it was waiting. The corridor was a tunnel through absolute night. Their lights, powerful as they were, seemed feeble and temporary. Their beams absorbed by the unnerving black material of the walls, floor, and ceiling. The only certainty was the path beneath their feet, the softly glowing mosaic, a river of silver and gold leading them inexorably forward. The air remained deathly still and sterile. Each breath a mechanical process filtered through their suits, a constant reminder of the artificial, preserved nature of this place. The silence was a weight, after the resonant harmonies of the antechamber and the terrifying threat of the threshold. This utter quiet felt like a held breath. The only sounds were the faint scuff of their boots on the mosaic and the hum of their own life support. sounds that seemed blasphemously loud in the sacred stillness. They walked for what felt like an eternity, though Dr. Cruz's chronometer confirmed it had only been 10 minutes. The corridor was perfectly straight, offering no turns, no doors, no features of any kind. It was a psychological test of its own, a sensory deprivation chamber designed to amplify doubt and fear. Just as the tension was becoming unbearable, the corridor ended. It did not open into another chamber. Instead, the mosaic path led them to a circular platform, perhaps 5 meters in diameter, also made of the light-swallowing material. Beyond the platform was nothing, a void. Their lights could not find a far wall, a ceiling, or a floor. It was as if they had reached the edge of creation itself. "What is this?" Petrova whispered, her voice barely a breath over the calms. She knelt, playing her light over the edge of the platform. It revealed nothing but an infinite drop into blackness. "It's a gateway," Thorne replied, his voice filled with a strange certainty. "The final barrier." As the last of them stepped onto the platform, a low thrum vibrated through their boots. From the periphery of the circle, 7 slender pillars of the same black material rose silently from the floor, arranging themselves in a ring around them. Each pillar was smooth and featureless until, with a soft click, a single symbol etched itself into the surface of each one, the 7 elemental symbols from the first door. Simultaneously, the mosaic path behind them faded, plunging the corridor into darkness. They were isolated on an island of light in an ocean of nothingness. "Well," Moro said, her pragmatism returning, "we're not going back that way." A light bloomed in the center of the platform. It was not a harsh light, but a soft, holographic projection. It resolved into a 3-dimensional, rotating model of a double helixer DNA strand. But it was wrong. It was too perfect, too symmetrical, with additional, unfamiliar base pairs interlaced with the standard adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. The hologram shifted, zooming in to the molecular level, showing protein synthesis, cell division, and the evolution of a complex organism at an accelerated rate. The organism that formed was undeniably human, but its genome was a masterpiece of efficiency and stability, devoid of the errors and redundancies that characterized natural human DNA. "This is us," Cruz said, her datapad worry as it tried to analyze the impossible projection. "But it's optimized, perfected. This is a biological blueprint, a design." The hologram changed again. It showed a world Earth, but not as they knew it. The continents were arranged differently, in a configuration geologists called Pangaea Ultima, a supercontinent that had last existed hundreds of millions of years in the past. The image zoomed in on a vast, thriving city of crystalline spires and flowing energy, populated by beings of breathtaking beauty and grace. Beings from the perfected blueprint. The civilization was advanced, peaceful, in harmony with their world. Then, the hologram darkened. A celestial object, a rogue planet or a brown dwarf star, entered the solar system. Its gravitational pull was catastrophic. Earth's axis shifted. Volcanic eruptions shrouded the sky. Tidal waves miles high scoured the continents. The perfect civilization was shattered, driven to the brink of extinction in a geological eye blink. The survivors were few. The hologram showed them, these perfected beings, their technology gone, struggling to survive in a harsh new world. And then, it showed them making a choice. They could not save themselves. Their time was over. But they could save their legacy. They could plant a seed. Using the last of their knowledge, they took the native, primitive hominids of this new, ravaged world, and they altered them. They spliced their own perfected genetic code into the raw, evolving DNA of early humans. It was not a clean process. It was a desperate, last-ditch effort to preserve something of themselves. The hologram showed the struggle, the failures, the eventual emergence of a new hybrid species, Homo sapiens. The truth was too vast to comprehend. They were not the product of random evolution. They were a designed species, a living archive, a project begun by a race that had come before, a race that had fallen. The Custodia Veritatis was not just a vault. It was a seed bank, a time capsule, a message from their makers. The hologram ended with a final, poignant image, a single figure, one of the ancient builders, placing a glowing crystal into a receptacle in the heart of this vault. Then, the sealing of the door, the long 5,000-year wait, the projection vanished, leaving them in stunned silence. The weight of the revelation was physical, pressing down on them. Father O'Flaherty had sunk to his knees, his prayers silent, his face a mask of utter theological upheaval. Dr. Thorne was weeping quietly, his lifetime of study rendered both obsolete and validated in a single, shattering moment. "The truth is afire," Petrova repeated, her voice hollow. The platform beneath them began to move. With a gentle, silent motion, it started to glide forward into the abyss. The 7 pillars retracted into the floor. There was no fear now, only a numb, awestruck acceptance. Lights began to bloom ahead of them, soft and indirect, revealing the space they were entering. The platform slowed and came to a stop. They were in the heart of the vault. The chamber was spherical and vast. The walls were not stone, but appeared to be composed of solidified light, shifting gently in color from deep blue to soft violet. Suspended in the very center of the sphere, connected to the platform by a narrow, transparent walkway, was a single, crystalline pedestal. And on that pedestal rested the only object in the entire chamber. It was not a weapon. It was not a book of wisdom. It was not a technological marvel. It was a simple, perfect, seamless sphere of pure white crystal, about the size of a human head. It pulsed with a soft, internal light, rhythmically, slowly. Thump, thump, thump. The same rhythm as the symbol in the antechamber, the rhythm of a heartbeat. This was the guardian of truth. This was what they had crossed time and terror to find. It was not a thing. It was a presence. It was waiting for them. The spherical chamber was a universe unto itself. The walls of solidified light pulsed with a gentle, hypnotic rhythm, a silent symphony of blues and violets that echoed the soft thrumming of the crystal sphere at its center. The air, though still processed through their suits, now felt different, charged with a potential that was neither electrical nor magnetic, but something fundamentally other. It was the air of a sanctuary, a womb of preserved knowledge. The team stood frozen on the platform, their earlier fears and exhilarations replaced by a profound, humbling awe. The walkway before them, a bridge of what appeared to be coherent light, led to the pedestal and the pulsing sphere. It was an invitation and a test of final courage. Dr. Petrova was the first to find her voice, though it was little more than a whisper. "Readings, Isabel. Anything." Dr. Moreau's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her sensors, aiming them at the sphere. Her screens flickered, displaying a chaos of conflicting data. It's emitting a field, but I can't define it. It's not electromagnetic. It's not gravitational. It's subtler. It's reading us as much as we're reading it. My instruments are detecting ... a feedback loop. It's analyzing our biosigns, our brainwave patterns. The heartbeat, Father O'Flaherty said, his voice filled with a strange mix of dread and wonder. It's not a metaphor. It's alive. In some way, it's alive. The culmination of their genetic mastery, Thorne murmured, his scholar's mind struggling to categorize the uncategorizable. Not a recorded message. A sentient archive. A consciousness preserved in crystal. The implications were too vast to hold in one's mind. This was not a history book to be read. It was a mind to be met. The decision of who would cross the bridge was made without words. They looked at each other, and the unspoken consensus was clear. They would all go. They had come this far together, through harmony and fire. They would face this together. Petrova led the way, her steps cautious on the seemingly insubstantial walkway. It felt solid beneath her boots, though it thrummed with the same energy that filled the chamber. One by one, they followed, forming a semicircle around the crystalline pedestal. The sphere pulsed gently, its internal light waxing and waning. Up close, they could see that it was not perfectly smooth. Its surface was etched with the same infinitesimally small, complex patterns they had seen throughout the vault, the language of its makers. "What do we do?" Cruz asked, her datapad held ready, though she knew it was useless. This was not data to be scanned. It was an experience to be undergone. As if in response to her voice, the rhythm of the sphere's light began to change. The pulses quickened, no longer a resting heartbeat, but a pattern of rapid, complex flashes. The light from the walls intensified, swirling around them, and the very air seemed to thicken with intention. Then, the world dissolved. There was no transition. One moment they were standing in the chamber. The next, they were ... elsewhere. Their physical bodies remained. They could feel their feet on the walkway, the weight of their suits, but their perceptions were utterly hijacked. It was not a vision. It was an immersion. They saw through the eyes of a being from the ancient world, a world of two suns, of skies that were a perpetual, gentle twilight. They felt the warmth of a different sun on skin that was not their own. They experienced the joy of a civilization that had conquered scarcity, not through domination, but through symbiosis with their planet. The knowledge flowed into them not as information, but as memory. The thrill of scientific discovery, the beauty of an art form that used quantum vibrations as its medium, the profound, spiritual connection to the cosmos. They felt the love for their world, a deep, abiding peace. The perspective shifted. They felt the first tremors of the cataclysm, the dread as the skies darkened with the approach of the rogue star, the desperate, failing attempts to save their world, the heartbreak of watching everything they had built crumble into ash and ice, the agony of extinction. Then, the resolve, the grim, determined purpose of the survivors, the great ethical debate, to interfere with the native species of the new world, or to let their own light die out completely. They felt the weight of the decision to alter the course of evolution on Earth, the hope and the terrible guilt of playing gods. They experienced the meticulous generations-long work of genetic engineering, the careful nurturing of the new hybrid species humanity. They saw themselves not as independent beings, but as children, as a project, a desperate prayer cast across a deep ocean of time. The vault was not built to hide a secret, but to preserve a heritage until its inheritors were mature enough to understand it, to receive the full scope of their own identity. The immersion ended as suddenly as it had begun. They stumbled back, gasping, clutching at the pedestal for support. Tears streamed down Thorne's face. O'Flaherty was praying aloud, not the rote prayers of his faith, but a raw, unfiltered outpouring of awe and confusion. Petrova leaned heavily on the crystal, her knees weak. Moreau and Tanaka simply stared, their scientific paradigms lying in shattered ruins at their feet. Cruz was frantically trying to record her own physiological and neurological responses, the only data she could now trust. The sphere's light had returned to its slow, steady pulse. It had given its gift. It had shared its truth. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not a silence of anticipation, but of absorption. The weight of 5,000 years of waiting had been lifted. The truth was no longer guarded. It was held, now, in the minds of 7 human beings. After a long while, Dr. Petrova straightened up, wiping her eyes with the back of her glove. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse, but filled with a new, iron resolve. "We have to seal it again." The words hung in the charged air, a stark, practical verdict, following an experience of the sublime. "We have to seal it again." For a moment, no one responded. They were still reeling from the psychic aftershock, their minds struggling to reconcile the visceral memory of a lost civilization with the cold, hard reality of the chamber around them. The sphere continued its silent pulse, a beacon of impossible history. Father O'Flaherty was the first to break the silence, his voice ragged. "Seal it, Alina. We have just been given the answer to the oldest questions of our species. We have learned our own origin. This is the most important discovery in human history. We cannot simply lock it away. It is because it is the most important discovery that we must." Petrova replied, her tone weary but unwavering. She turned from the sphere to face her colleagues, her face etched with a new, profound gravity. "What did we just experience? We felt their end. We felt their desperation. We felt the weight of their choice to create us. This knowledge... It is not a simple historical fact. It is a fire. And Father Michael, you were right. It will consume." Dr. Thorne, though his heart ached at the thought of leaving this truth behind, nodded slowly in agreement. "She is correct. Think of the world above. Think of the divisions, the ideologies, the wars fought over pieces of land, over interpretations of gods that we now know were... echoes, shadows of this true history. To introduce this truth now would not unite humanity. It would shatter it. Religions would collapse," O'Flaherty whispered, the reality dawning on him. "Or they would fracture into 1,000 new, conflicting interpretations. The very foundation of countless belief systems would be pulled away. Not just religion." Dr. Moreau interjected, her scientific mind already racing through the consequences. Science too. Biology, genetics, archaeology, every field would be thrown into chaos. The political order, nations, borders, the concept of us and them, it would all be rendered meaningless overnight. The shock would be catastrophic. Dr. Tanaka, ever the pragmatist, added his assessment. "The technology implied in this chamber alone, the energy source, the material science, The biological understanding is thousands of years beyond our own. To release it into a world that still fights wars with bullets and ideology would be to give a fusion reactor to children who have just discovered fire. The imbalance of power would be instant and absolute. It would not elevate us. It would destroy us. Dr. Cruz, who had been silently processing the data stream of her own experience, looked up, her eyes wide. The sphere ... It didn't just show us the past. It assessed us. It measured our worthiness, not by our ability to solve a puzzle, but by our reaction to the truth. The final test isn't opening the vault. It's choosing to close it. The truth of her statement settled over them. The ancient builders had not left a treasure to be plundered. They had left a responsibility to be shouldered. The real guardian of truth was not the crystal sphere. It was them. It was whoever stood in this chamber and understood that some truths are too potent for a world not ready to receive them. The choice was agonizing. They held in their minds a revelation that rewrote everything. To keep it secret felt like a betrayal of knowledge itself, a betrayal of the builders who had waited so long. But to reveal it felt like a betrayal of humanity, a guarantee of its self-destruction. "We are not closing it forever," Petrova said, her voice softening. "We are ... pausing it. The diary was right. The world is not ready. But now we know. A handful of us. We can prepare the way. We can guide, subtly. We can use our respective positions to steer science, theology, philosophy, slowly, gently, towards a maturity that might one day be able to accept this. It might take another century. It might take a millennium. But we will have kept the promise. We will have proven ourselves worthy guardians." The resolve solidified among them. It was a terrible burden, a secret that would isolate them from the rest of humanity forever. But it was a burden they now accepted. "But how?" Moreau asked. "The path we took, it was opened by the harmony. To seal it, we must unmake that harmony. The sequence must be performed in reverse," Tanaka stated. "The final step becomes the first. We must walk the path backwards. The door will only reseal if the song is unsung." It was a somber procession that made its way back across the light bridge to the platform. They took one last, long look at the pulsing sphere, the heart of the mystery, and offered it a silent promise. "We will return." The platform carried them back across the abyss to the corridor. They walked in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, the glow of the mosaic path now feeling like a farewell. They reached the threshold chamber. The obsidian door still stood open, the terrifying mosaic floor waiting. With a deep breath, Petrova initiated the reverse sequence. Cruz reset the metronome in their ears. One by one, they stepped back onto the tiles, in the reverse order of the creation harmony: spirit, thought, life, air, fire, water, earth. Each step caused the corresponding symbol on the wall to dim. With the final step, the soft glow of the safe path extinguished completely. For a moment, there was only darkness. Then, with that same whisper-quiet sigh, the two halves of the immense obsidian door slid shut, meeting in the center with a definitive, final clunk. The biohazard symbol was once again hidden from view. The defense system was rearmed. They stood in the antechamber, the magnificent murals now seeming like a sad, beautiful memorial to a world that was gone. They performed the reverse of the handprint ritual, deactivating the wall's luminescence, plunging the history lesson back into darkness. Finally, they stood before the circular stone door in the tunnel, weary to their bones, souls heavy with the truth they could never share. They struck the symbols in reverse. The stone cylinder ground back into place, sealing the Custodia Veritatis for a second time. The walk back through the ancient tunnel was made in utter silence. They emerged into the modern infrastructure of the Scavi, blinking in the artificial light, like survivors of a shipwreck. The world above had not changed. The sun was still shining. People were still going about their day, but they were different. They were aliens on their own planet, keepers of a secret too large for it. Days later, a press conference was held. The team stood before the world, their faces masks of professional regret. Dr. Petrova, as the leader, delivered the prepared statement. After extensive and unprecedented analysis, she said, her voice steady though her heart felt like stone, "We have concluded that the chamber colloquially referred to as the Custodia Veritatis is, in fact, a monumental and empty architectural marvel. Its purpose appears to have been philosophical, a testament to the human desire to seek truth. Beyond the sophisticated and protective outer mechanisms, the inner chamber is void. There are no artifacts, no records, no hidden knowledge. The truth it guarded was the question itself, not the answer. The announcement was met with a global groan of disappointment. Conspiracy theories exploded, accusing the Vatican of a cover-up. Most of the world, however, quickly lost interest. The mystery solved in the most mundane way possible. There was nothing there. The team disbanded, returning to their respective corners of the globe. They carried with them the greatest truth in human history and the agony of its suppression. They exchanged no letters, made no calls. Their bond was absolute and silent. Father O'Flaherty returned to his books, now reading them with new, sad eyes. Dr. Thorne revised his life's work, inserting tiny, careful clues that would only make sense to a future generation. Dr. Moreau and Dr. Tanaka redirected their research towards global cooperation and sustainable technology, subtly guiding progress. Dr. Cruz built encrypted archives, storing the real data for a future date no one would live to see. And Dr. Alina Petrova, alone in her study, would sometimes look at a photograph of the vault's exterior and hear the echo of a silent pulse. They had not found a secret. They had inherited a duty. The vault was closed. The waiting had begun again. But now, for the first time in 5,000 years, the Guardians were no longer silent. They were walking among humanity, quietly, patiently, preparing the world for the dawn of its own truth. The public disappointment was a storm that raged for a news cycle and then subsided, replaced by the next global distraction. The official narrative held firm. The Vatican vault was a magnificent, empty, philosophical statement, a dead end, a historical curiosity. The world, for the most part, moved on. But deep within the institutions of human knowledge, the hallowed halls of universities, the silent archives of theological seminaries, the cutting-edge labs of research facilities, subtle, unseen tide began to turn. The 7 Guardians, bound by their terrible secret, had become a silent catalyst. Dr. Eris Thorne returned to Cambridge a man transformed. His colleagues noted a new depth in his lectures on ancient languages, a strange certainty when he spoke of prehistorical cultural interconnectedness. He published a paper, dry and academic to the uninitiated, titled Linguistic Archetypes in Proto-Symbolic Eurasian Scripts. In it, he carefully laid out a framework suggesting a common, sophisticated root language that predated all known forms of writing. It was dismissed by some as speculative, but it planted a seed. A handful of his brightest graduate students found themselves steered towards this new fringe field. Their minds opened to possibilities that stretched far beyond the traditional academic silos. In Rome, Father Michael O'Flaherty requested a sabbatical from his teaching duties. He retreated to a silent Jesuit retreat house, but he was not praying for clarity. He was writing. He wrote not a theological defense, but a meditative exploration of the concept of divine echoes, the idea that many faiths, in their deepest, most symbolic core, might be reflecting fragments of a single primordial revelation, distorted by time and culture, but pointing towards a unified truth. His manuscript was circulated privately among a small group of progressive theologians. It caused quiet controversy, a whispered debate that began to gently challenge centuries of rigid doctrinal interpretation. In Geneva, Dr. Isabel Moreau leveraged her reputation from the Vatican project to secure funding for a new initiative. At CERN, it was not aimed at smashing particles at higher energies, but at developing more sensitive detectors to study the so-called background hum of the universe. Her proposal spoke of looking for subtle, coherent energy fields that might hint at unknown physics. Skeptics called it a flight of fancy, but a few brilliant minds, intrigued by the puzzle, joined her team. They began to develop instruments that could, though they did not know it, one day detect the resonance of a crystal sphere's pulse. In Tokyo, Dr. Kenji Tanaka turned his expertise from geological engineering to a new passion, planetary defense. He became a vocal advocate for international cooperation to track near-Earth objects, citing the universal vulnerability of humanity to cosmic threats. His arguments were compelling, grounded in the undeniable logic of survival. He never mentioned a rogue star or a lost civilization, but the ghost of that ancient cataclysm fueled his every word, helping to forge unprecedented alliances between space agencies in the US, Europe, Russia, and China. At MIT, Dr. Lena Cruz did the most daring thing of all. Using a labyrinthine network of encrypted servers and anonymized digital identities, she began to release fragments of data. Not the truth, never the truth, but puzzles. Complex, beautiful algorithms based on the harmonic sequences and fractal patterns from the vault, uploaded to obscure corners of the internet, frequented by the world's most brilliant coders and mathematicians. They were presented as theoretical exercises, intellectual challenges. She watched, hidden as these Enochian ciphers, as the online community dubbed them, captivated a generation of digital minds, training them to think in a language of harmony and symbol, preparing the intellectual soil. And Dr. Elena Petrova, perhaps bearing the heaviest burden, used her newfound fame as the leader of the failed project to ascend to a position of significant influence in global archaeology. She used this platform not to reveal, but to redirect. She championed grounds for excavations at sites that aligned with the ancient timeline: megalithic structures in Göbekli Tepe, submerged ruins in the Gulf of Comhat, enigmatic formations in the Sahara. She subtly shifted the focus from competition between nations over artifacts to a collaborative, global effort to understand humanity's shared prehistory. The term cradle of civilization began to be replaced in academic circles by network of origins, a concept she quietly nurtured. Their work was slow, patient, often frustrating. They operated in isolation, never communicating. Their only bond, a shared, silent purpose. They faced skepticism, bureaucratic hurdles, and the constant aching loneliness of their knowledge. There were nights each of them stared at the ceiling, wondering if they had made a catastrophic error, if the truth should have been unleashed to let the chips fall where they may. But then they would remember the immersion. They would feel the echo of the civilization's peace, and then the utter horror of its end. They had felt the weight of the choice their makers had faced. They had chosen, as their makers had, the long, difficult path of stewardship over the quick, destructive path of revelation. They were sowing seeds in winter, trusting in a spring they would never see. Years began to pass. The public memory of the opened Vatican vault faded into a trivia question. But in the undercurrents of human thought, something was stirring. Interdisciplinary conferences between geneticists and linguists became more common. The dialogue between physicists and philosophers grew more serious. The idea of a common human heritage, deeper than race or nationality, began to gain traction in sociological models. The world was not waking up to the truth, but it was, slowly, fitfully, stretching in its sleep. The gears of human understanding were beginning to turn, gently nudged by unseen hands towards a distant, inevitable alignment. The guardians watched, and they worked, each in their own way. The truth was not in a vault anymore. It was in them, and they were patiently, silently, weaving it back into the fabric of the world, one thread at a time. The waiting continued, but it was no longer a passive wait. It was an active, quiet cultivation. The dawn would come, not with a bang, but with a gradual, collective awakening, and they were ensuring that when it did, the light would not blind humanity, but illuminate it.